On this video, I'm going to go through Hebrews 1 again, except I'm going to do it this time with Greek grammar. I did it before with English, just expounding it in a more of an expository point of view. Now we read Polymerus kai polytrapas palehata as lalesas, tois patrasin and tois prophetais. In many parts and in many ways, God of old, having spoken to the fathers in the prophets, variantly God spoke in the Hebrew Bible, and now of old, lalesas, he's spoken to the fathers in the prophets. This is sort of review of the grammar too. Lalesas is from laleo. It's the aorist participle nominative masculine singular from laleo. So following the two adverbs, many parts and in many ways, God of old having spoken to the fathers, here we have the dative plural, in the prophets, another dative plural, in these last days, eskatu ton hemeron, tu ton elalesin hemen in huio, pan etheken tleranaman panton, dihu kaiapoiesin tus ionas. Upon these last days, or in these last days, he spoke to us in the Son. Again, notice elale sin is the aorist indicative active third person singular from laleo. In these last days, meaning the messianic times, have arrived. There's two ages, ha'olam haya, ha'olam haba, the age that is, the age that is to come. And between, as these two overlap, we are now in the last days, the writer of Hebrews is saying. Whom he placed, han etheken tleronaman pantom. Now he's going to talk about 7 things he placed in the Son. This is a reference back to Psalm 2, Beniata ani hayom militiha. My son, you are, this day have I begotten you, looking at the coronation day of a king. And of course, in the New Testament, the coronation day of Christ was his resurrection. We see this in Acts chapter 13. So we move on. Han etheken kleron naman panton, whom he placed heir of all things. In other words, Jesus was placed heir of all things. That God placed Jesus heir of all things. Han is your relative pronoun, accusative singular, from has, and then etheken is from tithemi, as we've seen before, aorist indicative active third person singular, whom he placed heir of all things. Kleron naman is your accusative singular followed by your plural, panton, genitive, from pas, pantas, panti, and so forth. Panton is your plural, genitive plural, whom he placed heir of all things. Jesus is heir of all things. Ask of me, and I'll give you the nations for your inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for your possession. And now it's being applied to Jesus, who is indeed heir of all things. Dihu kai apoiesin tu sayona, through whom, notice dia here has shortened to d, and the alpha being elided, an elision of it, through whom d takes the genitive, and who is your relative pronoun, genitive singular, has, who, so forth, going back to the Son, through whom also he made the ages. Apoiesin is your aorist indicative active third person singular from poieo, through whom also he made the ages. Ionas most feel to have reference to the universe. So those are 2 things, and then we move on to the third in verse 3 concerning Christ. Ha on apalgasma tes doxes, who being the radiance of the glory. On is a present participle nominative masculine singular from emi, and apalgasma means radiance. who being the radiation or the radiance of the glory. Has, by the way, is your relative pronoun, speaking of Christ. And tes doxes is your genitive singular, feminine, a noun, of the glory, going back to the Hebrew idea of the kavod of God, the glory of God, who is the radiance of the glory, kai karakter tes hupastasa osautu, and the exact stamp of his essence. Karakter is something like exact stamp of his essence. Hupatasaos means essence, a genitive singular, and then autu is genitive as well, of his essence. So Jesus radiates the glory of God, and he is the exact stamp of his essence. He's fully divine. Feran tapanta to remati tes dunameos autu, bearing all things by the word of his power. Pheron is a present participle nominative masculine singular from phero, bearing all things. Ta panta is your accusative neuter plural. Pas, pantas, panti, panta, and so forth. Pantes, panton, pasin, panta. So bearing all things by the word to remata. Notice to remata is your dative singular with the article by the word of his taste dunameos, of his power. So by his powerful word he bears all things. Phero can mean like holding it all together or bearing history along. Both meanings have been discussed relative to this phrase. The next statement, and this brings us up to where we were, katharisman ton hamartion poiesamenos, that is, having made purification of sin. Katharisman is your accusative singular from katharismas, having made purification of sins. Ton hamartion is your genitive plural with your article as well from hamartia, having himself made. Poiesamenos is from poieo. It is your aorist middle participle nominative singular, masculine singular from poieo. So we would render it having himself made. Jesus himself made the katharisman, the purification of sins. And then the seventh thing, akathesin in doxia tes megalosunes in hupselois. That is, he sat down on the right side of the majesty on high. Akathesin is your aorist indicative active, third person singular from kathidzo. He sat down on the right side, and our mind goes to Psalm 110, verse 1. Shev lemeni arashiro yevecha adon veravecha. Set at my right side until I make your enemies the footstool of your feet. The Lord said to my Lord, and that text is applied here to Christ, that he is now seated in the place of honor at the right hand of God the Father. So sit at my right side, or at my right side. He sat down on the right side of the majesty on high. That is, Jesus is now seated in on the right side. Dexia is your dative singular, on the right side of the majesty. Megalosunes is your feminine noun, meaning majesty, uh, singular, genitive singular, of the majesty in hupselois, on high places or on high. And then we go on, tasuto greton genomenas ton angelon chaso diapharoteran parautus kekleranameken anoma. That is, having become so much better than the angels. Clayton is comparative use of the adjective here, having become so much better. Genomenon is your present middle participle nominative masculine singular from genomai, having become so much better than, we have a comparative use here, than the angels, inasmuch, so, that he has inherited, inasmuch as a more excellent name than them he has inherited. So he's greater than the angels in that he has inherited a more excellent name than them. Notice kekleronamekin is from kleronameo, the perfect indicative active third person singular from kleronameo, to inherit. So he's greater than the angels in that he has inherited a more excellent name than they have. And so he finally then begins to drive home the argument how that the Son is superior to angels, beginning in verse 5. And we carry that down through verse 14. Tenegare pen pataton angelon, huias mu e su, ego semeran gegene kaset. To which of the angels did he ever say, "You are my son, today have I begotten you"? This is a quote from Psalm 2. And notice, gegeneka is your perfect indicative active first person singular from genao. He never said that to the angels, "You are my son," only to Christ. And it's a passage that has a double meaning, looking not only at the coronation day of a king, but the coronation day of the final king, Jesus. Kai Palin, and again, ego essamen auto eis patera, kai autas estai moi eis huion. I will be to him a father, and he will be to me a son. Esomai is your future indicative middle first person singular from Ami. So I will be to him unto a father, and he will be to me unto a son. And whenever ha tan depalan asegage tan protatokan estain oikamenen lege, whenever he shall bring his son, his firstborn, into the inhabited world, he says. By the way, asagage is your aorist subjunctive third person singular from asago. Whenever he shall bring, the firstborn would mean the sovereign, into the inhabited earth, he says, kai praskune sato san auto pantes angeloi theu. Now he quotes from the Septuagint, a passage from Deuteronomy 32:43, that all the angels of God worship him. And here we have the aorist active imperative from proskuneo, that all the angels of God worship him. And I'm going to stop there. This is a quote from the Septuagint. So the thought is, angels have never said, "You are my son, I have begotten you today, I've coronated you today, you are my coronated son." Never said that. And he never said, "I'll be a father to you and you'll be a son to me," only to Christ. But what he did say to Christ, that all the angels of God worship him when he returns the second time, that will be the encouragement that angels are to bow down before him. So he's showing his greatness over angels.